The idea of families seems so simple, right? I mean, it's the first group we ever belong to. But if you look at it sociologically, it is one of the most complex and rapidly changing parts of our society. Seriously, what it means to be a family has shifted so dramatically, and getting a handle on that shift is absolutely key to understanding the world we live in today.
So let's just start with a quick question. When I say the word family, what's the first image that pops into your head? Go ahead, picture it for a second. Got it? Okay, hold on to that image because we're about to see just how much that typical picture has completely transformed over the years.
And wow, this slide really lays it out. Back around 1900, it was totally normal for multiple generations, grandparents, parents, kids, to all live together, often working a family farm. Now, you fast forward to today, and that big, sprawling picture has been replaced by all sorts of different structures that are usually much smaller. Okay, so to really get a handle on today's family landscape, we've got to know the lingo. The two forms you'll hear about most are the nuclear family. That's basically just parents and their kids. And the blended family. That's what happens when people remarry and bring children from previous relationships together under one roof. These have become the new, common building blocks of the modern family. So, how do we actually see these changes happening on a massive scale? Well, one way sociologists do it is by looking at global trends in marriage and divorce. And let me tell you, these numbers tell a really fascinating story about how families are being redefined all across the world. Just take a look at this. This chart shows marriage rates, and the trend is crystal clear, isn't it? For most of these countries, it just looks like a slow, steady ski slope headed straight downhill. And this reflects some huge societal shifts, things like women having greater economic independence and changing social norms that make it way more acceptable to live together without getting married. But when we turn to divorce, the story gets a whole lot more complicated. If that marriage graph was a nice, smooth ski slope, this one is more like a volatile mountain range. I mean, it's all over the place. There's no single universal trend here. And that's because divorce is so heavily influenced by local stuff. We're talking a country's specific laws, its religious views, its economic stability, you name it. Okay, so we've seen what's changing. The structures are different, the trends are shifting, but that brings up a much bigger question. If the very shape and stability of families are in flux, what's the fundamental point of a family anyway? What is its core job in society? And that brings us right to the family's core functions. See, sociologists have identified these key roles that families seem to play in pretty much every society everywhere. These are the basic essential tasks that keep both individuals and the whole community chugging along. And here they are, the four big ones. First, there's economic support. Putting food on the table, helping a relative out. Second is emotional support and intimacy. The family acts like a safe harbor from the stresses of the world. Third is socialization, and we're going to dig into that one in a sec. And fourth, families help regulate sexuality and reproduction. All right, let's zoom in on socialization because this one is so important. This is basically the process of learning how to be a person in your specific culture. Your family, they're your first teachers. They show you all the unwritten rules of the road and help you build your own understanding of how the world works. And listen, this isn't a one-and-done kind of deal. It happens in stages our whole lives. Primary socialization, that's what our family gives us when we're little kids. Then comes secondary socialization, when school and our friends teach us how to fit into bigger groups. And finally, adult socialization is the constant learning and adapting we do as we take on new roles, like becoming an employee, a spouse, or a parent. It never really stops. Okay, so now we know what families do, but why do they work the way they do? What are the mechanics behind it all? To answer that, we need to look at them through a few different theoretical lenses. Each one gives us a totally new framework for understanding all those complex dynamics. And a really great way to think about these theories is to picture them as different pairs of glasses. You put on one pair, and suddenly the big picture comes into focus. You switch to another pair, and now you're seeing all the tiny little details. Each pair helps you see the family from a completely new angle. All right, first up, let's try on the family systems glasses. This theory doesn't see a family as just a bunch of individuals. Nope, it sees the family as one single complex machine. It's made of all these interconnected parts and subsystems. And just like in a car engine, if one part is under stress, believe me, the whole system feels it. This diagram of the Rodriguez family is the perfect example. Just look at Maria, right there in the middle of this whole web of relationships. She's a wife, a mother, a daughter-in-law, and a grandmother to newborn triplets. What this shows is how stress from all these different subsystems, like caring for her mother-in-law and also trying to support her totally overwhelmed daughter, all of it puts a massive strain on her, which in turn strains the entire family system.
Okay, time to switch glasses. Let's look through the lens of social exchange theory. Now, this one is pretty straightforward. It basically suggests that deep down, our relationships are a little bit like economic transactions. We're all subconsciously doing a cost-benefit analysis, weighing what we get out of a relationship against what we have to put into it.
The whole trick is just figuring out what counts as a reward versus a cost. Rewards are the good stuff: love, companionship, feeling financially secure. Costs, well, that's the tough stuff: fighting, emotional stress, maybe feeling like you've lost some of your personal freedom. According to this theory, we tend to stay in relationships as long as we feel like the rewards are outweighing the costs. And for our last pair of glasses, we're going to zoom way in with something called symbolic interactionism. This is what we call a micro-theory. It's not worried about the big structures. It's all about the small, face-to-face interactions and the shared meanings we give to symbols, like words, gestures, or actions that actually make up our day-to-day reality. And this slide just captures the power of symbols perfectly. Just think about Rosa Parks. She said, "All I was doing was trying to get home from work." And if you look at it objectively, that is exactly what happened. But that simple, everyday act became this incredibly powerful symbol of defiance against injustice. And it sparked a massive social movement. It just goes to show you it's our shared interpretation of an act that gives it its real power. So we've looked at the trends, we've covered the functions, we've tried on the different theoretical classes. Now let's try to pull it all together and think about what this all means for the future of the family. So if you're going to remember anything, remember this. First, there's really no such thing as a single typical family. It's a concept that is always evolving. Second, even with all these changes, families are still doing vital jobs for society. Third, those theories we talked about, they're just different tools, different lenses to help us see family life more clearly. And finally, knowing all this isn't just for a class. It can actually help us make sense of our own lives and our own relationships. And all of this leaves us with one last really big question to chew on. We've seen where the family has come from, and we've taken a snapshot of what it looks like today. But as our technology, our culture, and our world just keep changing at this incredible pace, what do you think the family of the future is going to look like? It's definitely something to think about.